Hello, welcome to this video on Bodhicaryavatara, chapter 7, verse 75. Yattaiva tulakam vayor gamana gamane vasham tatotsaha vashang yayad riddhischaivam samriddhyati. And again with the text in front of you. Yathaiva tulakam vayor gamana gamane vasham tatotsaha vasham yaya driddhischaivam samriddhyati. Now remember in the last verse, the first element of the two things being compared, they reverse the more normal order of the yata tata, and the tata line was first and the yata line was second. Here it's done in the more normal way, with the yata as the first, well, in fact, in the first line, the first word of the first line, and the tata as the first word of the second line. Both varied by sandhi, of course. Yata eva becomes yataiva, and tata utsaha vasham becomes tathotsava vasham by sandhi. So there's no verb in the first line. What's happening is that this verb yayat, which is the optative form from the root ya, meaning to go, which is an expanded form. Originally, the root I and the root ya were the same root. So ya is just, you might say, an expanded form of I. And it has essentially the same meaning, to go. Incidentally, we have the word yana, as in mahayana. A yana is a going, therefore something in which one can go. Therefore, a vehicle, the mahayana. So just as a tulaka, yata tulaka, just like a tula, yataiva tulaka, just in exactly the same way as a tulaka, a piece of cotton, that's fluffy cotton, is still on the cotton plant. Yayad goes or might go. Vayor gamana gamane vasham. So Yayad Vasham goes under the power, Vayor of the wind, or acts under the power of the wind. Gamana agamane, in its going and its coming. So just as the cotton is under the power or influence of the wind in the coming and going, that probably means in the coming and going of the wind. Yeah, the wind comes one way, goes another way. So Vayor, you say Vayor Vasham Yati, comes under the power of the wind. Gamana gamane, gamana agamana, all that in the locative. Gamana gamane, in its coming and going. So just as a piece of cotton fluff comes under the power of the wind as the wind goes one way and then goes the other way, tata, in the same way, tata, thus. Yayat, here it's the generalized third person, one should. Yayat, one should go utsaha vasham, under the power of one's endeavor. This word vasha, I've done a note on it, means power, but specifically power as influenced by one thing or person upon another thing or person. If you're talking about strength, one's inner power, inner strength, you'd use the word bala. But vasha is, I think I'm right in saying invariably, as all of the instances that I can remember is invariably, let's say invariably, it's the power that one person thing exerts over another. So if you come under the power or are operating under the power or influence or control of somebody else, If you come under their power, it's somebody vasham eti. So somebody, you come under the power of the king, you see. Bhupalasya vasham eti. He goes power of the king, means he goes under the power of the king. Eti or yati, effectively variants from the same, ultimately the same root. So just as the bit of cotton fluff acts under the power, influence, control of the wind as it comes and goes, tata yayat, in the same way one should be, one should go, utsahavasham, under the power of one's endeavor. The meaning here, as I understand it, is that, as so often happens in life, you make a good resolution to do something, your utsaha, right, I'm going to do that, and what happens? When the cold morning comes, you don't quite do it. You become under the power, and you yesham yati, one goes under the power of something else, laziness, distraction, something more exciting to do. The message that's been given here is that ideally you decide by your utsaha, by your endeavor, you decide what you're going to do, make a resolve to do it, and that it ought to be that resolve under whose vasha you act, under whose vasha you operate. In other words, that is what has power over you, ideally. Don't let other things, distraction, hedonism, desire for sense pleasure, laziness, don't go under the vasha of those other things. Remain utsaha vasha, under the power of your utsaha, your endeavor. Note that with this use of this word vasha, you can have it in a compound, utsaha vasha, under the control, under the power of your utsaha. You can also separate the compound, and it would be equally correct to say utsahasya vasham yati, going under the power of your endeavor. Just as in the first line, you have vayor, then another word in between, vasham, vayor vasham, under the power of the wind. Vayor gamana gamane vasham. You actually separate them there. So you can have vayor vasham or vayu vasham without any distinction of meaning, just as you can have utsaha vasham or utsahasya, new word vasham, again, no difference of meaning. Riddhis chaivam samriddhyati. The aivam, or on its own, evam, meaning thus, in that way, as in our well-known evam maya shrutam in Pali, evam me sutam, thus have I heard. Here it means in that way, in other words, in the way that you've just described, namely, if you do remain under the control of your endeavor rather than being blindsided and distracted to other things. Evam, in that way, your riddhi, your spiritual power, samriddhyati, will grow strong. In fact, it's it's the same riddhi and samriddhyati are both from that same root. It's your strength or your power. The riddhi is actually the, let me call up iPad. Where's he gone? Here we are. The root is rid, and the basic meaning of that root is oops, called in the wrong place. Rid. Here we are. Oops, what am I doing? Here we are. To cause to increase or prosper, to accomplish. So the idea is the growing of something. So it can be both an intransitive like to prosper, to succeed, or it can also be transitive, to make something grow. So the root meaning of that word is just growing. We see it most commonly in the root vrid, actually. Primitively, they probably came from the same origin. So riddhi, growth. Now, let's make the root rid, and we can make a verbal noun out of that by adding ti, very common. What happens if we get a d followed by a t? They just merge into a double d. So that's why we get riddhi. Just for example, the same would happen with the ta. Well, look at this one. Bud plus ta becomes by Sandy Buddha. So rid plus ti, riddhi. So riddhi, literally growth, prospering. And then by extension, it means spiritual powers. It turns up in Pali as iddhi. It's that same word, because Pali doesn't have the vocalic re. So riddhi Sanskrit, iddhi Pali. So samriddhyati, prospers. In that way, one's riddhi, one's growth grows, meaning one's spiritual power, samriddhyati, grows, prospers. In other words, your spiritual ability or spiritual power will grow and prosper, provided that you aren't kind of blown about like a piece of cotton here and there, whichever way the wind happens to blow, that's the way you blow with it. No, you decide what you want to do, your endeavor, your determination to do it, your utsaha, and then if you remain utsaha vasha, under the power of your utsaha, evam riddhi samriddhyati. In that way, your spiritual power will grow. So I'll go back to the text. Oh, by the way, I've given a fuller explanation of utsaha in verse 2. It embodies the notion, the sah, of overcoming an obstacle, overcoming difficulty, opposition. Curiously enough, it's cognate with the German Sieg, S-I-E-G, victory, modern Icelandic Sigur, victory, and in Old English Sige, S-I-G-E, in Anglo-Saxon meant victory is dropped out of use in modern English. Victory in the sense of you have overcome opposition by your endeavor. You've overcome opposition. So the ut up is that rising up and fighting. The utsaha, rising up to overcome the obstacles, the opposition that you face. The utsaha. So utsaha vasham, you voluntarily make it your utsaha that will govern your actions. And if somebody else governs your actions, you are that person vasha. For example, para means another. If you're paravasha, under the power of another, it means you aren't an autonomous being. You can't control your own life. Utsahavasha. So I will read this once more. Here we are. Let's enlarge it one more step. 2 more steps. Yathaiva tulakam vayor gamana gamane vasham tatutsahavasham yayad riddhischaivam samriddhyati. At one point, just note here for the sandhi, we've got the visarga there, followed by a cha there, and visarga followed by a cha, it becomes a sh, so riddhischaivam. You can't say riddhischaivam, riddhischaivam. And finally, before we wind up, yataiva tulakam vayor gamana gamane vasham tatotsahavasham yayadridhischaivam samridhyati. Well, there we are. That's the end of verse 75 and the end of chapter 7. So, congratulations to those of you who've made it with me from verse 1. We have now completed the whole of chapter 7 of the Bodhicaryavatara.